Welcome to the Travel and Living Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Baker. This is the show that discusses everything living and working and traveling here in the region of Costa Rica and perhaps even Central America. I'm a British expat that has been living here in Costa Rica for well over 15 years now, so know a thing or two about living and working in the area. Please don't forget to subscribe and follow along to wherever you get your podcasts to never miss a weekly episode. We really appreciate you guys hitting that subscribe button, and the same goes for YouTube as well. If you like or have any comments about the show, please let us know in the description box and I'll get straight back to you and even include some of your questions in future episodes. Today's guest is Rachel Peck. Rachel Peck is a senior travel consultant at Costa Rican Vacations and has now been living in Costa Rica with her husband for over 10 years. Those guys have raised their kids in the more off the beaten path region of the central southern Pacific here in Costa Rica in the town of Uvita. We have an exciting conversation with Rachel that's, as ever, is full of great information about what it's been like raising the family in a region that she knew before it had a really big boom of development with a lot more influx of tourists and travelers, as well as expats living in the region. So if you're interested in visiting that part of Costa Rica, make sure to have a listen. So without further ado, let's jump in and get chatting with Rachel. Hey, Rachel, great to see you on the podcast again. How are you doing?
I'm good, Adam. It's been a long time. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I think is this maybe the third time you've been on one of our different variations of podcasts over the years?
I think so. Over the last few years, I think maybe three, maybe two or three. I can't remember. It's been a long time.
I know you're one of our more senior travel consultants with a ton of experience. How's it been for you in the last 3 or 4 years, going through the pandemic and coming out of it, working in tourism?
Yeah, that question was a little more sensitive maybe 3 years ago, but now I feel like we've kind of come out of it. Once COVID hit, that year was a pretty rough year. Mentally, everything just with, I love this job so much, I love this company, and it was all gone for a little while. So the fact that it's come back 10 times stronger has been the best kind of cherry on top over the past 2 years. But now we're starting to feel a little bit of our low season, which is kind of a nice breath of fresh air after the past 3 years of going nonstop, which I of course love. So it feels really good to still be in this role, still be with this company, and still sell vacations, because that's truly what I love to do.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Travel is one of those things that will never die. And obviously when you feel like you're just kind of locked up and closed down, the freedom just to travel beyond borders and get out was something else, right?
Yeah, and we saw that a year, once the borders opened back up, we really started to see that with how extreme the demand was over the past 2.5 years after it hit. So no, it was, and to talk to people, and people were like, we've been stuck in the house for 1.5 years. Let's get out and do this. So it was really it kind of gave me a refresh of our job, just because it was one of those things that people want to come back and they want to do it bigger. They're like, you only live once, let's really do this experience. So it was really fun to kind of have that be the mindset. So it was a really unique and good thing after COVID. So
yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's going to be interesting to see if that bubble is also reflective of how people choose with their life decisions about whether or not they want to move to Costa Rica, or they were maybe thinking about it on the bench, as it were, and they're actually going to do something different and don't necessarily get stuck in the old day job or a place they don't want to be, and maybe make that maybe make that big move. Speaking of which, as I like to do on the podcast, it'd be great to hear about how it all began for you in Costa Rica. What first brought you down, and why Costa Rica?
Yeah, so my mom is a huge traveler. I know you know my mom, and we'll get into that. But my mom is always someone that is very much traveling every year. Growing up, we went to ski trips. We went to Jamaica, Mexico, and Costa Rica is one we did quite a few times when I was younger. And then I met my now husband, Adam, about 12 or 13 years ago. We came here to visit right after we met. My mom was living here, not necessarily full time, but she was here maybe 9 months out of the year. And so we came to visit her down in Uvita. And while we were here, Adam was with me, my husband, and we were down on the beach, and we ended up meeting younger people that were our age. And we were like, wait a second, you left you left the US, you left your job to move to a different country, because we're from Texas and that's not as common,
right.
And so we were young then. And so then we were like, wait a second, maybe we could really do this. And then we get back, and it took us 1 year to sell everything. My mom did help us with the transition. She was currently living here. And so we moved down here. We just had our 10-year anniversary last month. So yeah, so we ended up, we didn't think we'd be here for this long. We thought it was going to be more of a, let's sell everything, live on the beach for a while, enjoy the Imperials, and then move back maybe a year later. And now 10 years later, we've had both of our kids here, and we are here. My mom moved back, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. Well, she's kind of all over now, but she's no longer here. And so people thought like, okay, are you going to stay? And I'm like, no, this is our home. Like, this is it for us right now. So we're very, very happy here.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And it's more amazing that your mum has gone back and that you've stayed. So I would like to ask
Yeah. A
you,
lot of people thought, and she actually even felt guilty because she was like, I feel like you came here, had my support, and now I'm leaving. And I'm like, no, mom, like I appreciate that, but no, we're good, So and she still comes back to visit quite a bit, but no, my husband and I, we really, really love being here, and it just feels it's changed over the past 10 years. We have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old that were both born here in Costa Rica in San Jose, and so of course the different chapters have changed over the 10 years, but it's still kind of all been the same. The minute we fly back into San Jose, you just feel settled. Like my heart's like, okay, you're here, you can breathe, so it really is a feeling still to this day of like home for us.
that's a really nice thing to say. I remember when I started my Costa Rica experience, when I first had to leave the country for the visa runs in 06, 07, 08, I do remember, we didn't have much money, so I was crossing the border on the bus.
Yeah.
I always remember that feeling of coming back in, getting the stamp in Costa Rica, thinking, it doesn't matter where I am in the country, I'm now home. Whether I was traveling to Panama or Nicaragua or other countries flying back, there was that kind of relaxing feeling. And I don't know, for me, that was something that I knew that it was an important country and this was going to be kind of for the longer run. Rachel,
sure.
how long was your mum in Costa Rica before you were having those experiences and seeing what the country was like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually don't know. Maybe 3 years. It wasn't a long time. So she came down here. Her plan wasn't to live here full time, but she ended up finding a really cool. She does groups for travel, and so she wanted to find a place that's great to bring elderly people that can still travel and move around. But of course, you need a specific property for that. So she ended up finding it here in Uvita. She kind of put money into it, ran it. But I honestly can't remember how long she was here for. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know it was a few years though.
That's super interesting. Would you say it was your mum's love of Costa Rica that inspired you, or when you came down, you also loved the culture, the people, the ambience? What was it that triggered the love of Costa Rica? And you mentioned Uvita specifically. I would like to get into why that area, but I'm fascinated to understand if it was that family connection or the country.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't. Sorry, mom, but it definitely wasn't. It's kind of funny. Long story short, my husband and I, Adam, met when we lived 3 hours away, and so we did long distance for about 6 months. And he lived back in the hometown that I grew up in, and so we came to a place we were like, hey, we're 6 months in, like we're serious. What are we gonna do? And I had told him like, hey, if I move back to our hometown within a year, we got to leave. We got to go somewhere, whether it's a different country or doing something different. I knew that I had been out of our hometown for quite a few years. And so I knew that I didn't want to end up there for the long term. And so I've always loved traveling. And so when Adam and I came here and kind of felt it, we were like, so even if my mom wasn't here, I do still think we would have made something big happen. I don't know where it would have been, but I had traveled Costa Rica now through our job. So when we first moved here, we didn't have money either. So traveling was not really what we did. Yeah. So we kind of ended up here. Now I've been to Tamarindo and all the other places years ago, 15, 20 years ago. My mom brought us as kids. And so I didn't really get the chance to explore the country until I got this job. And now I've been all over the country multiple times, pretty much all the areas. And I still, to this day, will say that Uvita is still, there's a few places like Santa Teresa that I really do love, and the Osta Peninsula, but for living and now that we have our kids, we have to look at schools and that kind of thing. And we have found the school that we see our kids at for until hopefully they graduate high school. So now, of course, it changes on the way we look at things. But definitely when we first moved here, Uvita and it's funny because when we moved here, there was not many young people. There was a few here and there, but mostly we hung out with older people, retired people who were definitely in a different situation than us. Yeah. And so now it's changed so much. And now we have met, friends that are our same age, that have kids our same, kids' ages. So it's definitely changed a lot in what we look for, but still to this day, I still love Uvita. It's definitely changing. I think eventually we want to maybe head south towards Ojochal, which is still 15 minutes away from Uvita, just because Uvita is very busy right now. It's where everybody comes for their groceries, the banking, and it's great for that convenience. But I definitely think that eventually we're going to want to start to get more back into the nature side of things and have a river on our property and that sort of thing for the kids. But yeah, Uvita is still a place that we drive in and we're like, I'm so glad that we made Uvita home.
So to give some context for those listening or watching, the Dominical and Uvita area is on the southern central Pacific coast of Costa Rica. Would you say 45 minutes south of Manuel Antonio driving?
Exactly. Yeah, about 3 hours from San Jose and 45 minutes from Manuel Antonio.
So to get to Avita, obviously you can fly into Quepos Airstrip, 25 minutes from San Jose, and drive down, or you can take maybe the 4-hour trip more or less from San Jose driving. So when you first came down 10 years ago, that was very much considered off the beaten path. I remember when I was a travel consultant years ago, one of my very first CPLs or complimentary trips to a hotel was a hotel called Cuna de Angel, which is just off the road on that region. So it's very rocky, very interesting, beautiful mix between, you know, the beginning of primary rainforest meeting the ocean, but very off the beaten path, very underdeveloped. Now you've been there for 10 years. I would love you, could you summarize the Dominical Uvita area when you first came and how that's evolved and what that's like for you who's seen it before and after this tourism boom?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, you know, when we moved down here, you know, the main highway was already there. So like that is a big deal because I know maybe 5 years before we moved here, they had just paved the whole highway. And so it's funny, when I first got this job 8 years ago, everybody pretty much lived in San Jose. And whenever they found out I lived in Uvita, they're like, what are you doing in Uvita? Like out of all places. And I'm like, no, it's, you know, so, you know, what I really love about it, and even it still is that it's literally, it's like Manuel Antonio where the mountains meet the beach. So you can be sitting at the beach, look up and see the jungle and then the mountains behind it. And it is just like, to this day, I still will go out to certain beaches and I'm just like, this is my home. I cannot believe it, you know? Monkeys everywhere. So 10 years ago, I still feel like it was, you know, definitely off the beaten path in a sense, but that Uvita still had the banks, the grocery store, you know, there wasn't a lot of like shops, tiendas, there wasn't much of it. And it was very much a sleepy town, you know, except to have the banks and everything like that. Usually everyone lived in Dominical. That was the place everyone wanted to be because Dominical is the surf town. It's very cute. It used to be all, you know, dirt road where you walk through. There was like 2 or 3 restaurants there and that's pretty much it. And we loved it. You know, we really did love it, but we would, you know, it was something that there wasn't really. What you did here was you go hike, you go to the beaches, and then you go drink beer at one of the local, you know, one of the 2 local sodas that were there off the strip of Uvita. So, and now, wow, it's pretty crazy what Uvita has turned into. Everywhere we go, we have like a smoke shop in town now, which is super random. We have these like little stores, really cute boutique stores everywhere. We have vegan restaurants. We literally have everything that we have 2 Indian food places here, which is crazy, because that's very specific as well. But yeah, it's definitely, it's delicious, but it's like Uvita, I never would have thought we would have had Indian food on top of that, 2 Indian food places. But yeah, I mean, I'm thankful for it now because now there's more to do, especially having kids. You know, when Adam and I moved here, we just enjoyed going to softball on Saturdays and drinking beer with everybody. And then that was what our weekends were. Now it's very much like there's kids dance classes. There are different, even we have our own like kids theater program where they put on shows, you know, every few months, like things that like you never, when we first got pregnant with Brixton 7.5 years ago, there was not, I didn't know one person that was around our age that had kids. So it was like, do we go back to Texas to give our kids kind of what we think of what the childhood that we had, you know, going to museums and parks and playgrounds. And then we end up not wanting that necessarily for our kids. We were like, no, this is definitely where we kind of want to raise, you know, more kind of in nature and that sort of thing. But now there's everything. And I think that since COVID, of course, slowly there's been people moving down here. But definitely since COVID, I think in the beginning when you had mentioned, you know, people are now starting to not want to sit at their desk and do the same sort of, you know, in a cubicle, you know, it made people realize like, hey, life is too short. Let's get out and do stuff. And there's 2 or 3 private schools here that have really opened up like opportunity. And so a lot of people from Canada and the US have come here. And with that, of course, brings more conveniences, you know what I mean? Like there's a whole bunch. Just put in like a racket and tennis club in Ojochal, which again, like those are things that are normal in the US, but like and maybe normal in San Jose, but here in Uvita and Dominical, it's like why do we need a pickleball court? And so it's really cool to kind of see it change from being just beach and rivers to now having more things to do for everybody. So it's interesting. It's kind of sad because I will drive down the road and see where it used to be all rainforest and now it's multiple little shops. But I do see it being good for the community.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, that it's finding the right balance without the overdevelopment, but at the same time still retaining the charm of what made it unique initially, and of course the balance with nature. How do you find the expat community? I'm guessing that's grown with the popularity. So is it pretty substantial?
Very much so. Yeah, I mean, like I said, when we had Brixton, there was only a few families down here that we would run into. I'm sure there were local families, of course, everywhere, but expat families, it wasn't as common to see. Now we literally go somewhere and it's crazy. We'll sit at a restaurant and see, and because there's 3 different private schools here, we end up seeing multiple kids that we've never seen before. And we talk to people like, yeah, we've lived here for 3 years, and we're like, what? Like, that's so crazy. So yeah, the expat community has grown tremendously. It used to just mostly be people that are retired wanting to get away from up north where it's nice and cold. And now it's definitely families that are leaving the US and Canada to kind of get back to their roots. You know what I mean? So, and with our daughter's school, it's a school in Ojochal that definitely attracts more families that are. Are you there?
Yep, I'm there. So lost you for a second. I don't know if that was me or the rainforest internet.
Yeah, no, my electricity went out, but I have my battery backup. So if you can hear me good, I think we're good.
There you go. I can. Perfect.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so the school, Brixton School, has definitely brought in so many families because it's a very unique and special school. So we've met so many families that, I mean, have just moved here anywhere from 6 months to 2 years ago. And with that brings, it's fun because there's kids stuff to do everywhere. That we have mini putt here in Uvita, like things that I never would have imagined having here. And now I'm really thankful. But the expat community has definitely grown tremendously. I do think there's still people that are coming here that are retired, but I think people that used to look for this place as more off the beaten path are definitely going to different locations. It feels a little bit like the people that are moving here are, needing and wanting more of the conveniences that now Avita has. So it's kind of an interesting mix because we used to meet people who wanted to be in, off the grid completely, separated, maybe come down the mountain, once a week. And now it's definitely people that want to be social, want to do. So we've seen like a shift, where it's now very sociable people, with people around me in Adam's age that, before it was all, 50 to 70-year-olds that were coming here. So that's been a really interesting shift.
You mentioned that you're thinking about moving shortly to Ojochal, just down the road. Is that mainly for the school's convenience, or are you getting away from that big shift?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely, the school is down there, which would be super helpful to be super close. But I think that Uvita, I don't want to say it not knowing for sure, because I do feel like Uvita is like very overdeveloped right now. To the point where there's construction everywhere. It's almost depressing, like where we live, we're renting right now because, long story short, I know but my husband built a house, we sold it, and then now we're getting ready to our next project. So we're renting right now. And where we're renting, they've built like 7, 2 and 3 bedroom, nice houses, but it's all, they destroy all the rainforest for it. And so, of course, it gives us a place to live, which I'm thankful for. But at the same time, it's like the monkeys now, I see where they used to come. So that part depresses me. But again, we came here 10 years ago looking for it. And I know people are still looking for it now, what Costa Rica has. So it's hard for me to kind of like, be negative about it. But I think Uvita is just really busy. There's traffic everywhere. It's almost like a big city, even though it's not. And Ojochal, I think it's more, there's a lot of development in Ojochal as well, but I just feel like it's more rainforest right now than what Uvita is. Uvita is pretty much kind of turning into more of like the city. And we don't want to go 15, 20 minutes off the mountain because we have the kids, So in order to do that, here in Uvita, we probably could still find some properties that are pretty, in nature, but with the kids' ages, I think 15, 20 minutes at the mountain's a little bit hard because then we still have to drive places. So Ojochal has it where it's more accessible, but still being kind of in the rainforest.
It's funny because it seems like you're going back, you're not, I wouldn't say you're retrograding, but you're going back 10 years to a very similar pattern of trying to find the nature again. And then you're having
Yeah,
to move with
absolutely.
the times. I think about other areas that have had that overdevelopment, you know, Santa Teresa, Malpais, certainly
Yeah.
Mount Antonio over the course of 30 years, Dominical, and you talk about construction, obviously you look at Northern Guanacaste, and the fact that you feel like you do have to move away from that. So again, anybody thinking about traveling to visit these areas, I think this kind of information is invaluable because you don't necessarily know you'll go and see it, but you're actually living it to when you can see the growth. It's
Yeah,
it's that fine
absolutely.
balance again. When you
Yeah,
say
and it's interesting because when we moved to I think the last podcast we did, I was in our last house, which was on the flat grounds.
yeah,
And so we've lived a few different, here in our 10 years, we've lived in 4 different places. And so the first one was beachfront, which was awesome. I'll never do that again. It was just too hot.
yeah,
The next one was up in the mountain a little bit. And then the next one was the house that my husband built that was in the flat grounds. And I was so excited. I was like, I'm excited to get off the mountain. I'm excited to be able to have my kids, ride their bike up and down it was like a little subdivision.
yeah.
And so after there 2.5 years, I was like, okay, I'm done with this sort of suburban living. I want to get back up in the mountains. So it's funny, kind of, I do feel like we're going backwards on. We had the flat ground living where our kids got to ride their scooters and my daughter learned to ride her bike there. But now I'm like, okay, I don't want to be so like, I don't want to have neighbors, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we're going, enjoyed it for a little bit. We were excited and now we're going backwards where we want to get out of it.
It's
It's
interesting. It's good that
funny.
you can be so flexible. That I think that like that character trait helps because some people might want like, oh, it's too much work going up and down, back and forth. But it's lovely that you're able to do that and have that
For
flexibility.
sure. I definitely think that brings up a good point. I definitely think to kind of do this lifestyle here, even if it's for 3 months, you definitely have to be very flexible and willing to just throw your hands up and say, okay, for Avita, this is not what I thought was going to happen. And that's what I think helps mold people into like what I think in the end, what we're all looking for when we come here is to like really kind of change and get out of our norms. So yeah, it definitely takes some specific traits, to come and move here.
Do you feel like you mentioned Pura Vida there, the old Costa Rica trait, pure life? Do you feel like that in the 10 years living here, that's really helped you? Were you that kind of relaxed and flexible before you came here? Or has Costa Rica just embedded that into your personality?
That's a really good question. I'm very type A, and I think the good thing is I think this job, because I'm a travel planner, like I get all of that out in my job. And so then elsewhere, like in my normal life, of course, I still love to plan and that sort of thing. But, I would say that I'm definitely a lot more laid back being here and just realizing like, hey, if that doesn't work out, like we'll figure it out and not, not
Yeah.
focus on it too much. So I don't know if like which came first, the chicken or the egg. I
Yeah.
definitely think Costa Rica here 10 years because sometimes I'll be around people that are from the US and are fresh out of the US and I'm like, I think I'm like way too like I think I've been out of the US for way too long because there's certain things that they say where I'm like I don't relate to it in a sense. So I definitely think Costa Rica has helped kind of bring me back down to tranquilo a little bit, which I think is good.
Yeah, oh, no, for sure. I mean, it's one of the highlights of Costa Rica in general, right? Especially as an expat coming in from our expectations of our own cultures and our growing up in whether it's North America or Western Europe, and then bringing some of those positive things and then kind of molding it and finding the balance
Yes.
with the culture here.
Yeah.
I
And that's what I
imagine.
kind of hope for the kids, like because they still have Adam and I that even though we've been in the US for 10 years, like there's still a part of that culture that's embedded in us that we cannot get out of. But like that's why we're hopeful that our kids will kind of get the not, obviously there's no perfect balance, but that they can hopefully get the Costa Rica, Pura Vida, like life is not all about the rat race and having the nicest car, but then also having where you still can work hard to get the things that you want. So it's that one's still up in the air for us, but at least I hope with our kids, like maybe we'll be able to give them a little bit more of that than what, we had growing up, because there's a part of our culture that's what I wanted to run away from, but it's still in me. You know what I mean?
No, of course, it's only natural. I wanted to touch on that subject. You mentioned 2 or 3 schools. I would love to know how big those 2 or 3 private schools are, but more importantly, what has it been like raising your kids in that part of Costa Rica? And what are some of the pros and cons? I can imagine there's a ton of pros, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely the pros is like what I remember when we first got pregnant with Brixton, she was a beautiful surprise. And Adam and I daily would go on walks on the beach to debate whether we were going to stay here or go back to Texas. Because like I said, at the time, we didn't know anybody that had young kids in our situation as being an expat, coming here. So that was a really hard one because we were like, we know that this is definitely different. We're 3 hours away from the best, hospital, and we also have to, there's a lot of things that would be a big decision to make having kids. Schools were one of them. And so when we finally made the decision, we kind of said, you know what, like, let's give it a try. I would really want to raise my kids in a place that's not so intense on the rat race. And so when we made the decision, it was like, okay, this is good. Like, this feels really good. But of course, we didn't really know, not having a kid, like what we'd be looking for. So, I definitely, the pros for sure are, we really, and what I love about Brixton School, it's a holistic school. So they do things very much, they try to, we really try to do things that are very little to no screen time. We try not to do a lot of sugar, the things that of course we all strive to do as parents for our kids.
Super healthy.
I do think that, it's easier in the US to have the iPad at dinner, to, have the processed food, fast food. And those are things that I'm thankful here. Of course, it's still here, but it's easier being in a community, and especially at the school we're at, that you start to meet other parents that are on your same page. So then it helps kind of solidify like how you feel about it. And then being around people that kind of have the same mindset and that you align with is a really big, like, it just feels really, really good. So definitely the pros are that. I feel like it's something that I really want our kids to not look at, every nice car and be like, oh, that's what I want. Instead of just like, oh, cool, we have a car, we're thankful for that. Definitely the pros are going to be like raising them, in nature. Like what we do on the weekends are we go to the Uvita waterfall, which is one of our favorite ones. And my kids love to just travel down it and explore. Like they love to just truly be jungle kids. And being at the beaches every weekend and doing things. And through our job, I earn a bunch of really wonderful CPLs, like you said, the free 2-night stays at hotels.
Yeah.
And so we, like last weekend, we went to the Golfo Dulce and spent 2 nights down in Puerto Jimenez. So, that's what we spend our time doing versus, I don't know what we would do in the US. I really don't. But the pros are definitely being in nature, enjoying what this country has to offer that is, unique and amazing. Like we did the whale and dolphin watching. So we got to see the pod of 150 dolphins. Like those things I see through my eyes, and I'm like, this is so unique and special. People spend a ton of money to come to Costa Rica to visit as a 1-week vacation. And we get to do this as like our weekend trips, and next week we're going to Lodge for 2 nights. So there's so many things that I love to give them, those experiences that people do on vacations that we get to do as our normal life, luckily through this job. But the cons, definitely, there's not museums down here, there's not, so when we go to San Jose, we like to get, because we love food, there's definitely more restaurants here now that we really enjoy, but there's not as much kid activity. So there's not any sort of trampoline parks, there's not any of the cool museums or the, down here, we don't have that. So I used to kind of feel a little bit like, man, I just wish my kids had more to do. And now we've got a good group of friends that all have kids the same age. And so we do stuff every weekend that's fun for them. So there's definitely cons in that sense, but I've kind of now accepted that I'd rather, have that versus the pros. I feel like I'm sure there's definitely a lot more cons, but that's kind of right now what I'm thinking of what are the big ones.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And I kind of feel like you mentioned, we have such a good fortune in traveling the country and having so many pinch yourself moments that it becomes our part of our lives, whether you're watching pods of dolphins or going whale watching or ziplining through the forest or just going into a cloud forest or hiking a volcano. Like that's one of the amazing things that this part of the world allows us to do. And I can't even imagine growing up and or as a new father raising my daughter, even being based in San Jose. It's a really good question, because I'm thinking as you're talking, sometimes we can get caught up with work, and it is a metropolitan area here in the Central Valley. So as she grows up, I'm going to want to do these weekend trips constantly, get out, visit the hotels and see the
You're in a great spot. You're so close to all of it. Right. Like 2 or 3 hours, you could be there.
Sure. But at the same time, one of the cons is you don't want to get caught up in the same thing. I love going to the cinema, and we do have a lot of great food options, but you're still in the metropolitan city, that's a developing country, up and coming, right? So you talk about the iPads and the screens and whatnot. When I first started, I was based in Monteverde, and there was a lot of that holistic teachings, a lot more involvement with nature, and it's still a very nice green community, and it was very isolated. Obviously, technology helps the communication, so you don't feel quite as isolated, perhaps, especially with friends and family back home. something I've noticed in the last 2 decades. It's a lot easier to live abroad and still feel somewhat connected, even if you're not there.
For sure.
So yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing listening, obviously, where you go on the weekends, but then having some of those, I guess, home luxuries. The idea that there's a pickleball court just down the road, in the rainforest, that's hilarious to me. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's hilarious to us too, and
Yeah.
it's in that, but it's great for the kids, because a lot of the families that moved here have teenagers that aren't used to living here, and so they are going to need things that. So I think it's a good balance. Now, the finding the balance, I think, will be hard because it's such an extreme boom right now, for Uvita.
Yeah.
But I look forward to it for my kids because I still want them to be brought back to, okay, let's go to the rivers, let's go to the beaches. Those are still things that to me are like the important. But I like that we have those options now, and the older they get, I think there's going to be more stuff that can really add to the benefit of living here.
Yeah, no, of course. Do you think you see yourselves here in the long run?
Me, yes. Adam, my husband, he sometimes says, like, we've been here 10 years, maybe, and of course, our family's getting older, and, there's cousins and stuff like that. And even my daughter will say, like, why can't we just live in Texas next to the cousins, but then we come back here and they really do love it here. So yeah, I think for me, I see a long time for both myself and my husband, we see a long future with the school that we're in. So, but of course, 13 and 14 years old is a very specific age.
Yeah.
And I have hopes, and I do think that the school that they're getting ready to build a high school, the school that my kids go to. So I have high hopes. Of course, that's just we have never had a kid that age. So we want to kind of reevaluate. I personally don't see myself leaving for a long time, especially working in this industry, working with Costa Rica, selling Costa Rica. Like I live and breathe it. So I don't necessarily think, are we going to be here until we die? Probably not. I mean, but I do love living here, and I do see the next 10 years being here and helping our kids grow and have the base of, because they're Costa Rican citizens, so I want to give them the opportunity to live up until a certain age here to where they have this as the base, and then we'll figure out. I'll follow my kids wherever they go. I told my daughter, like, if you move to Africa, I'm coming with you, so we'll see. I do see the long term, the next 10 years being here, and then we'll kind of take it and see what comes up.
Wonderful. As I was chatting to you earlier, you mentioned that your mum headed back and she felt somewhat guilty because she encouraged you guys to come down. What was her reasons? Do you have? I'm sure some people might be asking, why did she leave?
Yeah, it's been a while. I think it's been five years or so. She originally left to go to Panama for a bit. She's not someone that likes to stay put, regardless. And now that all of us, there's 4 of us kids now that we're all grown and have our own partners and families, she does. So right now she's all over. So she'll go and stay in Texas for a bit. I think she's in Florida right now. So I don't think it was a specific reason on why she wanted to leave here. I think because she still comes back to Costa Rica and says, like, Costa Rica, and she's been to so many countries, and she'll say Costa Rica still has this feeling of, like, my heart is here. She's just someone that loves to be on the go all the time. She doesn't like to have a home base, and she does travel for a living. So she'll go do, a month in Greece and a month in Italy. And, she lives a very cool, that's what she does. She lives and breathes travel. And so she gets to go to all the places. So I don't think there was a specific reason. I just think that she just looks at it as the world is really large, and I want to keep on seeing more and more and more while I still can. So
amazing outlook. I mean, I love it. That's fantastic.
I know, me too. I'm like, what, Mom, you really like it. If she has the dream job that, like, all of us, when we get to a certain age, just want to, once our kids are growing up, to be able to travel and go everywhere. It's very cool. I'm very happy for her.
Couple more questions before I leave you. I wanted to ask you, if somebody's thinking about going to the area, Dominical, Uvita, or Hochal, what are your top 2 hotel properties that you would recommend in the area that they stay at?
I think it depends on their budget and what you want to do. I definitely think Cura is one that is like
very beautiful. Couples.
The views of Uvita, the views of the Uvita, this is adults only. So if you're coming as like a couple, it is very beautiful. The views, the food, everything about it, the customer service is amazing. And if you're more family friendly, I would say Villas Alturas. I do. Cuna del Angel is still down here, Adam, so you should bring your family to come see it. But Villas Alturas is it's a great price point. It's got 2 and 3 bedroom villas with full kitchens. The views during whale season, you can see the whales like breaching. And it's just such a good location. So, and rental cars are definitely recommended, but I would say for families, Villas Alturas, and then for adults only, more of a higher end Cura or Golden Pineapple Villas is a really beautiful one as well. But there's quite more hotels.
I would like to, that'd be something when I come down and meet you guys next time. bring my daughter down. That would be a nice place to visit for sure. Okay, final question.
Absolutely.
I always love to ask before I wrap up. What is the essential tip that you would give someone when thinking about making the big move to Costa Rica?
Ooh, definitely, like, I would visit for like 2 months in different areas, but long term, and come rainy season and dry season, because although Costa Rica doesn't have a bunch of different seasons, we do have two main ones. So I do think really experiencing it, just because we have not lost friends, but friends that have moved here and then leave. And it's not an easy place to live. I love it, but you kind of have to accept that when it's rainy, it is rainy.
It's proper rain.
Yeah, our daughter was stuck up. They were at a play date a few days ago, and because it was such a big storm, the river was so high that my husband had to wait 3 hours before we could get our kids, because they were up past the river. Yeah,
like
crazy. Even our car, we have a big Toyota, and it still would not make it over. So I definitely think come and experience it for long term, 2 to 3 months, and see different seasons, because it's definitely very different. But I think just kind of like, visiting it all first, and then you kind of get a feel on what feels good or not, because like I said, it's not easy to live, in different areas of Costa Rica. There's definitely the pros and cons, but if you feel that sort of like pool, it's really worth it if it's going to be a right fit for you. So I definitely think kind of exploring different areas is probably the best tip I can give.
It's a great tip. It's one that's come up before, but I mean, exploring different areas at different times of the year is massively important. That's a really great point, because like you say, if you're out in the sticks, when it rains, and that does have consequences. And the same with the heat. It does get hot as well up in Guanacaste. It does get very dry, lots of drought.
Yeah. March would be something that would be kind of scary to be in Guanacaste for. So no, it's definitely an amazing country. I love it, but there's definitely different microclimates at different times of the year. Very interesting.
Very true. Rachel, as ever, super fantastic to speak to you. As a wealth of information. I'm glad you're absolutely loving it down there. I will hopefully get down to Avita to play some pickleball sometime soon as a tennis fan.
Bring your daughter. It'd be cool to see our kids play together. Yeah, it's great chatting with you, Adam.
Thank you so much. And for anybody watching on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast, Rachel, I put you in contact information. So if anybody's interested in more questions about the area you live in or a trip to Costa Rica, they can reach out to you. Thanks so much. And hopefully have you on the podcast again in the near future.
Awesome. I look forward to it. Thanks, Adam.
Good stuff. Take care. As ever, it's always fantastic to chat with Rachel. She is a wealth of information, and it's really interesting to hear some of her experiences before and after moving to an area like Uvita over the course of 10 years. And not just that, what it was like raising her family and raising her kids as the schools were around them, while still remaining connected to nature and taking advantage of all the beautiful things in the Southern Pacific region of Costa Rica. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have any questions for me or Rachel, please let us know in the descriptions box below. And as ever, you can find Rachel's information if you want to reach out with her regarding anything traveling or living in Costa Rica related. Rachel is one of our senior travel consultants, so if you do want a vacation plan with Rachel, you are very much to be assured to be in safe hands. As mentioned at the start, please don't forget to subscribe or follow along to wherever you get your podcasts, as we really appreciate that. And of course, you'll never miss a weekly episode. For the Costa Rica Travel and Living Podcast, I'm your host, Adam Baker. Hasta la próxima.